welcome back to another episode of Mr. Squire's Civics and Economics class. So, today's video will be focusing on CE6C as well as CE6D, which talk about the legislative branch, which is the lawmaking process, as well as talking about the executive branch, which breaks down the powers and the roles of the president, okay? Or the roles and powers of the president. So, with that being said, let's get started. So, the legislative powers are express powers, which are specifically listed in the Constitution of the United States. And then there are implied powers, which are used to carry out express powers. Now, let's get into the lawmaking process in Congress. First step is the bill is introduced either by a senator or a representative. Next, it is worked in the committees or sent to the committees for review. After it is sent to the committees for review, it is debated on the floor of each house. After it is debated on the floor of each house, it is voted on in each house. And then after it is voted on, it is sent to the president, where the president will sign it into a law, or it will be vetoed. And what does veto mean, class? Correct. To reject or to put on hold or refuse, okay? So, that's pretty much breaking down the lawmaking process. And then the last thing you want to know about the legislative powers is that elected officials in Congress write laws and take action in response to problems or issues. And we talked about an issue before, such as police brutality. And because of police brutality, we have Congress now fighting to create new laws to protect minorities. And then next we have coming up is the roles and powers of the president. At this moment, I want you to watch this short video that's going to highlight each role as well as each power of the president. Alright?
With all of the things that the president does besides enforcing the laws, we have come up with labels for the various roles that they play. Now, if you Google presidential roles, you'll see various lists, most of which are pretty much the same, but they're slightly different in some cases. We will use the following: Chief of State, Chief Executive, Chief Diplomat, Commander-in-Chief, Chief Legislator, Party Chief, and Chief Economist. And these, again, are presidential roles. Chief of State is kind of a symbolic role the president plays as the head of our country. Remember, the state is the country. The president will hold ceremonial events such as welcoming national championship sports teams, lighting the presidential Christmas tree, or here, holding an Easter egg hunt. Sometimes under this role, you will see welcoming leaders from other countries, but I like to file that job under Chief Diplomat. Next is Chief Executive. Maybe you've heard the title of CEO, which means Chief Executive Order, and that is for people who are the head of companies or corporations, and that's what this role is like for the president. He is, quote, the boss of this massive executive branch of 4 million people, and he not only appoints some of these people to their jobs, but he rules this whole administration that is charged with the job of of enforcing the laws. Now, a diplomat is a person who represents their country to other countries. In addition to meeting with leaders from foreign countries, this role involves signing treaties with other countries and all of the interactions he has with countries around the world. The chief legislator implies the role the executive plays in making laws. By now you know it's the job of the legislative branch, which we call Congress, to make laws. But as we said, the president often suggests laws. Here we see a picture of President Obama promoting his idea for a law that was passed, known as the Affordable Health Care Act. However, even though Congress passed this law, it is so associated with the president that it's known as Obamacare. The president, as you know, also signs bills, which turns them into laws. So chief legislator is the president's involvement in the lawmaking process. Now, as chief of the party, the president is kind of the figurehead leader of whichever political party they are in. This often involves supporting fellow party members who are running for office, as we see former President Bush doing here. Finally, the role we already discussed, commander-in-chief, making the president the head of the military. Now, this is a good time to discuss the president's role in the declaration of war. I think many people think that it is the president who declares war, but it's not. It's Congress who declares war.
The last thing we want to know about the president's power is that the presidential power has grown in the years since the Constitution was ratified or since the Constitution has been approved. Now, I have covered CE 6C and CE 6D, which both focus on the legislative branch and the lawmaking process, as well as the executive branch and the roles and powers of the president. So, with that being said, as always, it is your wild and crazy teacher, Mr. Squire. Peace out.